Chapter 6, Break Case 1 Chapter 5. Break Case 1. 1 week later. Hell. This place. Johnny felt sand slipping out of his fingers. Warm, sharp wind caressed his skin and it made him feel irritated. He opened his eyes and stared right at a blood-red sky, his eyes quickly recognizing where he was. I know you're awake. The same deep voice of the Ghost Rider said. He quickly pulled himself up and cast an uneasy look. I must be dreaming. Johnny remembered that he had been previously sleeping on his futon inside his apartment. And yet right now, he was standing in hell, right in front of his throne. I can feel the sands and the air. Astral projection. Correct, I called your spirit to come here. Johnny knew that already. He crossed his arms over his white shirt and glowered in annoyance. You said you'd put me in a world where ghost riders didn't exist. He began, his tone aggravating per words. Can you explain why I encountered a demon, and not just any demon, a devil count named Halfaz? The Ghost Rider, not falling for his dissatisfied voice, stood straight on the left of the throne. He tilted his head slightly to the left, pondering his words. I am not mistaken, this earth doesn't have a Ghost Rider. He paused as his orange-red ember eyes stared straight at Johnny. I didn't say, however, that there were no demons or devils living in it. Johnny tightened his fist and scowled at the new Ghost Rider. So, you tricked me dash. I didn't. You just didn't ask me. Anger shot up inside Johnny. He had definitely been tricked by this new Ghost Rider, this new king of hell, and it infuriated him. He gnashed his teeth as he walked towards him. You sly bitch. He stood and towered a bit against the new Ghost Rider, his mouth curved into an vengeful frown. The next time I come back here, I'll kill you? His words were rasped and cruel, but the new Ghost Rider only let out a small amused chuckle. You're welcome to try. Then Johnny found himself yanked and pulled by chains. He let out a yelp as the chains hoisted him up. You're a Ghost Rider. You shouldn't complain. If you ever see a demon or devil, you should know what to do. Damn you. I'll kill you, you unknown Ghost Rider. I'll make sure hell will have another short-lived king like me. Johnny trashed around in midair, but the new Ghost Rider was unfazed. His threat to him was empty and more useless than air. Damn it. Johnny shouted as he shot up from his futon. Beads of sweat ran down his ashen face. His hair was messy and pointing everywhere. His chest heaved vehemently as he let out several short, sharp breaths. I astral projected. He was now back in his dirty apartment. His eyes then wandered to his table where a half-eaten, cold, instant ramen stood and right beside it was a black phone. Halfaz's. The event 1 week ago flooded his memory. Halfaz's dying and smiling face floated around him and he clicked his tongue. There's no way that I could bring salvation to demons, he said in a bitter tone and glanced down to his golden medallion. There's no way that devils would live peacefully with humans, let alone live like one. But why was his soul innocent then? How could he say those words with pure honesty? Questions after questions sprout out. Ack. He groaned in troublesome. His mind was completely muddled and in disarray. Good morning, Johnny. Your psychopath today is 50. Your hue color is still heavenly white. Have a good day today. The silence was broken by the device on his left wrist. Johnny looked at it and pressed its button. Taro, open the TV please. The hollow T.V pop out on the wall. News reports blew around his room as the man walked to his kitchen and opened the fridge. We now live in front of the MWPSB building, where Chief Inspector, Mika Shimatsuki, will give her statement regarding the mysterious vigilante that appeared and caused havoc in Shibuya Crossing 1 week ago. Johnny pulled out some milk and started pouring it into a glass. For now, we have an official alias name for this mysterious vigilante. The man paused and his eyes glared at the TV. His official alias name is Ghost Rider and he's MWPSB's public menace #1. Thanks, I get that a lot. Johnny wasn't bothered with what he heard. He had been named and labeled a lot by authorities. But this is the first time that I became a public menace #1. He smirked at the new title. Oh Johnny, you have a job meeting at 9 o'clock today. Taro-chan wishes you good luck. Taro, Johnny's personal AI hologram said after popping out from his device once again. It's 8:30 already. He gasped and made a dash to the bathroom to change his clothes. MWPSB, Conference Hall number 3. Shit. Shimatsuki cursed tensely under her breath. Her predicament right now was grave. The incident 1 week ago had almost thrown the whole country into chaos. Civil internet, e-newspapers, and even news television had captured the Ghost Rider and the mysterious creature that he had battled in the Shibuya crossing. No way out. She blew hot air in a turbulent way and tried to relax herself. Why can't the bureau chief do this press conference? She asked, agitated to the absence of the bureau chief. That's because, chief, the bureau chief was summoned to the national diet. A familiar, calm voice came out of her device. Akane-senpai. Shimatsuki grumbled anxiously. Somehow, the former inspector's voice relaxed her down a bit. I know that, senpai. She suddenly stopped and blushed. She remembered that Akane was already an enforcer while she was the chief inspector. Her position was higher than her. She could feel Akane's smile from the other end. Chief, just remember to calm yourself and stick to the script given by the bureau chief. I know that. The chief inspector had already reviewed the whole script many times before this press conference. But still, unforeseeable questions could throw her overboard, and it would ruin the MWPSB's reputation. She had to get her act intact. Right, thank you senpai, I mean, Enforcer Akane. No problem. Shimatsuki turned off her device and breathed air once again before she walked towards the podium on the stage. Chief Inspector, where's the bureau chief dash? Can you give some comments dash? Is Sybil still working? Chief Inspect dash. As soon as Chief Shimatsuki emerged, relentless waves of questions, coming from news reporters, hit her immediately. Flashes of light, coming from the droid news cameras barraged her completely, but her serious, stoic face didn't move. She stood in the podium, took a short glance around the jam-packed conference hall, and then tapped the microphone on the dais. A loud feedback echoed, silencing the whole room immediately. Good morning. All of the questions will be answered after this press conference, she said in a stern tone and motioned everyone with her left hand to sit down. As far as we know, the MWPSB doesn't have any information regarding the identity of the Ghost Rider. The huge screen behind her displayed a video of the Ghost Rider, rising from a crater in the middle of the Shibuya crossing. However, after conducting several investigations, we have only found out that the Ghost Rider could be an immigrant. The whole room then erupted into short burst of awe as some reporters began to throw questions at her, but then she raised her left hand, motioning them to keep quiet. It's only a possibility, but still the MWPSB will make sure that no stones will be left unturned. The video played, and the image of Ghost Rider and the strange creature appeared. The video, however, was heavily modified, for the creature was blurred, making it unrecognizable. Some of you may have seen this video on the internet. Sybil system has eradicated all of it, and only the MWPSB has the original file. We will make sure that we catch things and stop them from threatening this country. One of the reporters suddenly stood and asked, Chief Inspector, even if Sybil had deleted all of the videos, the fact remains that everyone saw the two strange creatures. Are they perhaps aliens? Again. Aliens, huh? Shimatsuki's right brow almost twitched in irate. One of the topics that were circulating in the net was that Ghost Rider and the creature were both aliens from outer space. I assure you we are looking at many possibilities on what this creature could be, and no, they aren't biological weapons made by the government that have gone rogue. Shimatsuki said sternly and asked, in a peaceful manner, for the whole room to keep quiet. One thing's for sure, she spoke again. The bombardment of questions quickly died down. The MWPSB has determined that the Ghost Rider is a threat and we will enforce him immediately the moment that we find him. So, I ask, on behalf of the MWPSB, that the public to cooperate with us in capturing him and establish order once again to this city. North Pier. Whoa, Chief's totally different today. Arita was absorbed to the press conference playing on his device. He was very much startled to see the Chief displaying a different look today. It's a good thing that Chief is holding on. Kay commented with a slight of satisfaction. The inspector turned off the device as the press conference ended and then shifted his attention to the wall in front of him. Okay, so this is where Halfaz died. Yes, with a single gunshot to the chest. From a shotgun, apparently. Kay said as the inspector kneeled. The wall was covered by Halfaz's blood. Kay's eyes became sharp and scanned the ground for clues. Scorch marks on the wall. Discharge from the shotgun? But there's no bullet shrapnel. His mind began to work. His hands swept across the bloodied wall. Shrapnel are missing. Which is strange. Halfaz died of a shotgun wound. His entire heart was blown up. Shotguns should leave shrapnel, Kagami said and stood beside Kay, who cast a bothered look. Yes. Great, this guy is with us again. Kay was upset at the sight of Kagami ever since he encountered him on the Bifrost case, 1 year ago. He was wild and determined to capture the culprit, and because of that, he didn't like him at all. And fate was cruel today. Since the Ghost Rider killed Halfaz, which was one of MOFA's target, the bureau chief had suggested to put a collaboration between the two departments. The bureau chief was determined to throw 2 stones against a single wild bird, and the bird was the Ghost Rider. And again, shrapnel disappeared. They don't just disappear. Kay thought for a moment before asked. Perhaps they melted. No, Arita answered bluntly. He stood up and cast a deep face to the two. Kagami-san, Kay, please try to imagine that there's magic in this world. Kay and Kagami looked at each other, confused and lost to what he said. Okay, so what if there is? Kagami crossed his arms on his chest. The inspector then took several steps and then stopped. He stood on the spot where he saw the Ghost Rider kneeling and in a daze. He then tilted his head in a puzzled manner before he walked back again and stood near the final resting place of Halfaz. Weird. Shotguns usually leave many gunshot marks, and yet the Ghost Rider stood on this spot, put the shotgun closely to his chest. He glanced back at the two. If Ghost Rider is crazy, he should have fired immediately, making a mess with his body. What are you saying, Arita? Kay looked down and then realized something. There were footprints back then. The shotgun wound was clean. The heart was completely obliterated. Did they have a discussion first? I can see the Ghost Rider walking around before he killed him. Which is contradicting to Ghost Rider's personality, isn't it? Kagami butted in as Arita smiled. The man was catching up to them. And there's no phone with him, which is odd. The victim conducts all of his transaction in there. Kagami added as moved closer to the wall. Shotgun marks, and again shrapnel dash. That's because it disappeared, magically. Kay winced slightly to Arita's words, but the inspector didn't notice. We live in a physical world bound by logic and reasoning. This shotgun that killed Halfaz was nothing out of this world. The inspector reasoned with them. The calm, warm wind of the ocean suddenly blew and swept by. The sound that it created was eerie and foreboding against the pier. Kay felt it, but he shrugged it off. Are you making the Ghost Rider's motorcycle an example? The inspector nodded and glanced at Kagami. He too had understood the reasoning of the inspector and he felt slightly disturbed. Why do I get the feeling that he is correct? He thought gravely and cast a grievous frown. And we all saw the video, who would have thought that Halfas could transform like that? And did you see how he crashed on the road? Arida paused as the two nodded at his words. He was shoved by the Ghost Rider's motorcycle, that came out from the sky. And if, just if, things like that exist due to Ghost Riders' magic, then why not a magical shotgun, right? Kay finally said while saying the word magic with a strong doubtful tone. If that is so then we are dealing with an out-of-this-world vigilante. The three of them stopped and looked to the source of the new voice. A new person, a woman, stood a couple of meters away from them. She was wearing an MWPSB jacket over a black suit. Her hair and eyes were brown and was showing a curious look at the three. Yes, you're correct. Who are you anyway? Arida asked as he titled his head, only to be elbowed softly by Kay. Arida, she's Akane Tsunemori, the one who recommended us to MWPSB. Kay said bluntly and salute DTHE former inspector, who only beamed a soft smile. The inspector blinked for a moment then his face shot up in red. I'm so sorry, senpai. Well he stuttered and it made Akane let out a small, delightful chuckle. Kagami smirked at his reaction. It's okay. You can relax you too. Akane assured the two and then smiled at Kagami. I'm glad you haven't done anything to them. What's that supposed to mean? Kagami ignored her words and shrugged, ignorantly. Arida went back to his investigation and looked down on the spot of Ghost Rider again. It looks like I need to go back again in there. Say K-. I know. You want to mental trace, right? Kay said with a simple tone. He knew that the inspector would suggest that technique again and it made him cast a worried look at Akane. I know how your mental trace works. I can help Kay in pulling you out, she said and beamed at the inspector. Arida calmly sat down on the wall and positioned himself the same as Halfas was in his last moment. He shifted his eyes on the group and grinned. Well then, I'll be going. Kay and the rest nodded and the inspector was transported again to the familiar and crazy grey world. It was raining, so hard. Arida opened his eyes, the sky above him became grey and colorless, the air still and sickly. Brimstone, sulfur. He recognized the scent and it almost made him gag, but then he stopped reacting after he noticed another being standing closely in front of him. You really wanna die? Inspector Goofy. The Ghost Rider looked down on him, shooting out embers from his eye socket. Arida didn't answer him first. Another emotion, from Halfas, quickly entered him. He gasped for breath as he felt a heavy feeling of happiness, tranquility, and most of all, peace. This feeling, it's Halfas's. I know. Isn't it annoying? The Ghost Rider said with balked tone. He pointed his left hand at him, summoning a shotgun. The inspector stared down at the barrel with hardened eyes, but then a new emotion suddenly surged within him. He's not scared of you. I don't understand it. He knows who you are and what you do, and yet he begged to be ended by you. Confusion muddled in him and it made him frown. His last moments didn't make any sense. The Ghost Rider only nodded, knowing that the inspector had reached the same realization as him. This one, I will give it to you. Why do you think that a devil like Halfas would be gladdened to be killed by me, a Ghost Rider? Devil? Halfas was really a monster? The inspector couldn't believe what he had just heard. So Halfas was the creature then. What on earth? The shock seemed to put him out of focus as he suddenly felt himself being pulled back, and then the grey world disappeared after a loud clap snapped in his right ear. The inspector's vision changed and, in a flash, he was back to reality. His mind was still foggy from all the information he had gained while his chest soared in pain from the emotions that he had encountered. Arida, you seem to have discovered something, Kay said as he pulled his friend from the ground. The inspector took a deep breath, calming and reorganizing his nerves and thoughts, before he spoke. There were black feathers found in the Shibuya crossing, right? His partner nodded. Not only feathers, but also traces of skin, muscles, and blood were left behind on the ground back on Shibuya crossing. I need to ask Shin to compare DNA of those feathers with Halfas's remains, and also, I need to go to the National Library and Museum. National Library? What will you do in there? Search for something regarding the Ghost Rider? Kay asked in a questioning manner and the inspector beamed an understanding grin. I think I know who Halfas really is and what the Ghost Rider could be. Kagami stared with a questioning look, an anticipating feeling building inside him and it made him smile. Something tells me he got it right. Aren't those two wonderful bunch? He whispered discreetly to Akane, who only made a nod of approval. Yes, I am not mistaken, I know Arida can solve this. She made a soft smile and continued watching the two. National Public Library and Museum. After 2 hours of boring interviews and meetings, Johnny walked along a bridge deck that connected the two buildings. The National Library and Museum was a large building standing in the heart of the city. Just like its namesake, the library housed all of Japan's educational books and documents. There were lots of people walking past him and most of them were students from different schools or universities. The library was also functioning as a museum. Saturdays and Sundays are the museum's usual busy times. Johnny paid attention to the old lady that he was trailing. She had interviewed him and now she was explaining to him about the job that he was applying for, which was librarian's assistant. He followed her in silence, answering her whenever she said something to him. I was surprised when you first appeared. I never thought that you would be so tall, she said in a jocular manner. A lot of people keep telling that to me, Johnny answered as he fixed his wide glasses over his eyes. He was wearing a grey jacket suit over his white, turtleneck shirt, and black slacks. His grey shoes pedal up after they entered on the next building. Study hall. Johnny's job, as a librarian assistant, was simple. Cataloging books and research papers within the library. It was a desk job, but it was good for him. If he were to live in this world then, other than hunting demons, he must also have a stable job. Lucky for him, the Sybil system had suggested him jobs that could provide him stable income. And one of them was this job. The work requires a low profile. Good thing I fit into the Sybil's criteria. He sighed in a relaxed manner while his fingers typed tirelessly. Oh Johnny-san, the old woman from earlier called him. Miranda-san, Ms. Miranda Suzuki, age 60 and the librarian. She was innocent, though she had an obsession with cats. Johnny, even without forming, had read her soul through his hellfire enchanted made glasses. The glasses on his face acted like a scanner and detector for sins and demons. Truly this invention of mine is handy. He smirked and bowed to his superior. Myra is fine, Johnny, since we're both gaijins. The old woman smirked mischievously, making the man chuckle. I'll be leaving early. If you have some questions just call me, okay? He nodded. The old librarian said her goodbye and left. Okay, time to work like normal humans do. Johnny smirked as he began typing again. MWPSB, Bureau Chief's office. The afternoon sunlight entered the window, basking the bureau chief's office with a warm orange glow. The bureau chief was sitting in front of his table, watching Inspector Arida and Kay from his computer screen. The two inspectors bowed politely at Shin and left the analyst alone. As the coast became clear, his stern eyes closed and pressed his device. Shin, are the two inspectors leaving already? Yes, Chief. Inspector Arida said that he has some research to do in the National Library. Searching? The chief was silent for a second before a smile formed on his face. I'll go down there. I need to check something. Shin bowed and he ended the call. He stood up and sighed in a dissatisfied way. Time to play my role. MWPSB, Analyst Lab 1. The bureau chief entered the lab and Shin immediately greeted him. He then walked towards the glass table and stood. His icy eyes, gazing through the glass, stared unmovingly at the feather and a test tube filled with blood. So, this is what remains of Halphas. Not what I was expecting. He thought as the analyst Shin stood beside him. Inspector Arida had asked me to analyze the remains. And the result was puzzling. What's puzzling about it? The bureau chief asked as Shin pressed the glass, summoning several hollow screens displaying the cellular structure of blood and the feather. The feather and the blood are both Halphas's. They match with MOFA's DNA database. Shin began stroking her chin with her left hand, her expression in a frown as she thought. The other monster on the video is really Halphas. The bureau chief stood silent for a moment, letting the ambient sound play around the room. So, we really do have a monster, huh? He crossed his arms over his chest and made a low groan, inaudible to the analyst. Now then how will Sybil react to this? The analyst's face turned into a questioning one and the bureau chief noticed it. He quickly made a smile and turned to her. Continue with helping Arida, Shin. He needs more manpower in this investigation. Shin nodded with seriousness at him and the bureau chief walked away, but after he passed the doorway, just before the door closes, he muttered under his breath. Otherworldly manpower, that's what I mean. National Library and Museum, Study Hall. That's the last one. Johnny stepped down from the stool and stretched his back. It was already afternoon. The study hall was almost silent and empty. He had been working for how many hours already and his back felt heavy. He made a relaxed sigh as he pulled his cart towards his desk. After this, I'll have to investigate Halphas's phone. Maybe there's dirt in there. Halphas's phone was in his apartment. He hadn't opened it yet, but he was sure it must contain something dangerous, probably the location of the other counts. He sat down at his desk and looked at his computer. I guess I'll put all-nighter tonight. Excuse me, could you help me look for a book? Sure, what title are you dash? Johnny turned to face whoever called him and then he froze. The startled face of the goofy inspector loomed over him, and it slowly turned into a recognizing one. Oh, Jonathan-san, you work here. Ah, you're Inspector Gu Arida, right? Johnny remembered the inspector form before. The inspector laughed a little. I'm glad that you remembered my name. It's a good thing you found a job. Shit, what the fucking hell? Jonathan's brain panicked, but he immediately calmed down and played along. Yeah, all thanks to the Sybil. So, how can I help you? Johnny asked and maintained his innocent smile at the aloof inspector. His heart, however, was beating fast, more than his Hell Cycle's piston engine. Arida hummed in deep thought and glanced around the empty study hall. I'm looking for the occult section, not the Sybil standardized one. Oh, he means the restricted section. Johnny's eyes sharpened a bit in suspicion, but he maintained his composure. We've only one section like that and it's in the restricted section. Be warned though, it might increase your psychopaths a bit, he said in a professional tone. It was part of his job to warn others of potential mental health risk that a person could get from reading those kinds of books. The restricted section of the library was dedicated to books that were labeled dangerous to mental health by Sybil, but important still for cultural and research purpose. That's okay, Arida only nodded in agreement. Of course, since you're criminally asymptomatic. Johnny thought as he stood up from his desk and began to walk. Hey K, are you coming? Inspector K glanced from his device and shrugged. Unlike you, my psychopath is a bit sensitive. And yet your sin is heavy as hell, Detective Nancy Drew. Johnny noticed the other inspector and his eyes darkened for a second, but he shook his head and fixed his glasses. Well then, Arita-san, if you could follow me please. Arita waved his hand at his partner and moved with Johnny towards the restricted section. National Library and Museum, restricted section. I can't understand much. Arita glared menacingly at the thick, dusty, large, brown book with the title, Demo Nica Goetia, lying on the table in front of him. He had spent an hour already and yet he was nowhere near to what he was looking for. He glanced to his right and painfully stared at the tower of occult books that he hadn't checked yet. Occult is pretty heavy, he muttered, dejectedly, and slumped in his seat. Arita-san. The inspector looked to his left and grinned at Johnny. Oh Jonathan-san, Arita is fine, he said and went back to his book. Johnny had been watching the glowering inspector and he couldn't help but smirk. He was like that when he was new to the occult and he was seeing himself right now on the inspector. Say, may I suggest this book? According to the net, this one is for beginners in the world of the occult. Johnny suggested and put the book down on the table. The inspector glanced at it. The title The Lesser Keys of Solomon was written on its front. Solomon. King Solomon. I heard that he was famous for something. Arita wasn't much into history, but at least he knew the person. He opened the book and slowly turned each page. I hope there's something in here that looks like a stork, huh? His eyes caught something and it widened in recognition. Found it. Hello there, the real Halfas. He muttered under his breath as he gazed through the picture of the devil count called Halfas, a stork with black feathers. He didn't, however, notice Johnny, who was staring at him hard, eyes cold and almost lifeless. You owe me on this one, Inspector Goofy. Say Arita, why are you looking for the occult anyway? He asked in a polite tone. Well, it's for a case. Liar, you need to work on your lying skills. Jonathan silently scrutinized the inspector, who then looked up to him and smiled. Thanks Jonathan-san. It's Johnny. People call me that, Johnny said and cast a smile at the inspector who resumed skimming through the book. National Library and Museum, The History of Religion Hall. He's gonna take a while. Kay thought and patiently waited for his partner. He wandered aimlessly around the hall. The museum was almost empty and it was near closing time. I wonder how Arita is doing. He paused, however, after he felt someone was watching him. He looked to his left and was startled to see a large hollow portrait. It was a man in large mitre hat, and dressed in all white clothes. His right hand was outstretched and grasping a glowing golden cross. He was standing in a hall while he pointed his cross at the doorway where a large ugly devil on fire was standing and sneering at the Pope. Pope St. Peter and the Banishing of Sinners. K read the title and gloomed at the hollow portrait again. TCH, how grotesque. He murmured and then turned around, only for him to stop after his eyes caught the sight of Kagami, standing a few meters away from him. Great, he really has to come with us. He didn't want him to be gone, but he wished that Enforcer Akane had come with them. But the enforcer was called by their chief inspector on an urgent meeting and now he was standing with former Unit 1 enforcer in a wide hallway, and surrounded by creepy-looking portraits. Kagami stared a large hollow portrait of an angel. The angel was in hell, several demons and devils were holding him down. Their sharp talons and claws dug into his skin and they seemed to be shredding him. The angel's face was stuck in an agonizing pained expression, his right hand up in the air, brandishing a broken weighing scale to the sky. The Rape of the Angel of Justice, Kagami muttered, making Kay glanced at him. That's the title. He added and pointed the name plaque on the bottom of the hollow portrait. I can read. Kay reminded in a stern manner, but the former enforcer ignored it. An awkward silence filled the gap between the two. I know you're still angry with me because of the Bifrost case. Kagami began, breaking the silence, and it made Kay grunt. It was true that he didn't like him one bit because of that case, but somehow, that anger seemed to die down. Yeah, but I would like to ignore what happened during that time so that our team can work together on future cases. Kagami shifted his eyes at him and smirked. What's with that smirk? Kay stared daggers at him, but he just sighed and looked back at the portrait. Pitiful, isn't he? The angel. He went down to hell to give that place an order or law and he had suffered greatly because of it. That's rude, can't you see he's working his ass off? Kay was startled at Kagami's interpretation and then looked back at the portrait. The angel's face was twisted in agony and yet his eyes were enduring and filled with determination. HOH, you're right. I never thought you were into paintings, Kagami-san. No, I am not. And Kagami is fine. He glanced at him and smiled. We're in equal terms now, as far as I know. Kay couldn't help but freeze at his words. He wasn't expecting the former enforcer to say something like that to him. How equal, if I may ask? Kagami glanced down to the floor. I have a feeling that MOFA and MWPSB will work together soon. The Ghost Rider, you see, had also hurt my friends. The former enforcer clenched his right fist, anger engulfing his aura, and Kay felt it. Oh, that's what he meant. Well then, when me and Arita catch the Ghost Rider, he paused as he popped his knuckles, I'll have you through the first punch. The two men agreed with each other and continued looking at the portrait. Commufield, Darnett. Halfas, number 5, is dead. Number 1 said in a deep, grave, saddened voice. The rest of the group glanced down at the empty chair where Halfas had once sat and chatted with them. This is so sad. Number 3 said, his tone filled with worry and sadness. His hands were on his chest, grasping it tightly, trying to bury the painful feeling of losing Number 5, but he failed. A small teardrop escaped his mask. Calm yourself, Number 3. Halfaz may be dead, but as he'll continue living inside our hearts. Number 2 said, trying to calm everyone, but he failed for his tone was empty and lifeless. Heh, I knew it would happen. Everyone turned their attention to Number 4. If they could show their faces, No 4's face would be displaying an uncaring grin. How could you say that? Halfaz helped us escape hell. Number 3 shouted in anger, but Number 4 only tilted his head in mocking way. Oh please, we helped each other that time. He's dumb. That is what killed him and he deserves it. The problem right now is that the Ghost Rider certainly knows that we exist in this world. Number 4 thundered hard around the room. With the defeat of Halfaz, the 4 remaining counts were now in a dangerous position. We should leave Japan right now? We should have stayed in Sean. At least there we could live. Live like animals, again, No 4. Number 1 said, his voice filled with vengeful fury. Do you remember why we needed to come to this country? He asked again, but Number 4 didn't answer him. We aimed to live in peace. We escaped hell, only to land in this hellish world? But this country was the only peaceful one on this earth, and so we came here, and we will stay here. Number 1 finished his furious rant and shifted in his seat. No one talked for a moment, the unnerving ambient sound of the virtual network filling their ears. It was a cruel silence, as if it forced everyone to reflect on their goals. Halfaz and I fell in love in this world. Number 3 began, but his tone was becoming light and hopeful. I think we should remain vigilant from now on. We must look after each other's backs, I mean. He paused and looked at everyone. That's what families are for, right? The other 3 virtual avatars didn't answer him, but they all made a nod of agreement. I think we should also contact our fixer. Number 3 continued, but Number 1 raised his right hand. I already did that. He said that he'll make sure to keep a close eye on the Ghost Rider using his own force. Number 3 made a sigh of relief. It is good that man was the one who discovered and helped us to get into this country. Yay, indeed. Number 4 added with a hint sarcasm, causing everyone to frown at him. Hell. The new Ghost Rider stood beside the empty throne, looking over at the great boiling lake of fire. His head was hung low and the flames around his skull was similarly small. It's been 1 week since the first encounter. He moved his head and his ember eyes moved as he turned around. I hope that you will continue your stance on not interfering in this trial. He looked down at the man, standing on the foot of the raised throne. The man was shrouded in white cloak with a hood over his head. He may look normal to others, as long they ignored the bright yellow halo floating behind his head. The man's halo moved with his head as he looked up. Yes, I am a fair person. I will never interfere with your project. He said in a plain tone, but it made the new Ghost Rider's flame rose up a bit. If only he could show his face right now, it would have formed into a fierce frown. It's not a project, this is a trial run, he said with a sullen tone and began to walk down from the throne. He reached the other's level and leaned towards him. So please, do cooperate on this. He snarled with an appealing voice. The man turned slightly and looked through his eyes, exposing the lower half of his face. I will, just as long as he won't cause too much ruckus. He replied softly to him and cast an angelic, pleased smile at the new Ghost Rider. Chapter 7, Case 3-1 Case 3-1. The Silent Forest Hotel. Part 1. 1 month later, unknown place. PL please someone help me. The walls inside a dimly lit corridor screamed and reverberated a man's voice. Loud scampering of footsteps was followed with wheezing, labored breath escaping from his lips. Where am I now? Is this really part of the hotel? His eyes, wide in horror, darted uncontrollably everywhere, searching for the sight of the one who was tormenting him. He stopped at a corner and rested his back on a wall. His chest rose up and down as his lungs scurried for air. The man had been running for some time, but to no avail. He could not escape the terror that was chasing him. They'll know that I'll be missing. I have no choice. He pressed the device on his left wrist and the glow of a hollow screen illuminated his frightened face. I am Inspector Morale of the MWPSB 4th Unit. I am in trouble. A loud screeching metallic sound, coming from the other end of the corridor, where he had been, echoed sharply and interrupted his video recording. I don't know what they are. Demons? They're demons. To the Chief Inspector, tell this to Unit 1. The devil is here. He turned off his device and took a mouthful of air before he turned to the corner. And then he gasped, his eyes widened in terror. A black creature stood in front of him. It was huge and tall. Its horns let out a metallic screeching sound when it scraped the roof and the air around him was engulfed with the disgusting aroma of brimstone and sulfur. He helped dash. The inspector's knees buckled in fright. He toppled and started dragging his butt across the rough cement floor. Get away. He pushed himself away from the creature. But the creature suddenly lunged itself at him and pushed the inspector's back towards the wall behind him. Its face was now inches away from the man. Ha, finished your video? It spoke in a deep curdling voice. PL please let me go? I have wife and kids dash. Which you've taken for granted, isn't that right, Inspector Morale? Ho how? But I was busy with my job. Is your career really that important? Oh well, I don't really give a damn about you humans and your relationships. He can read my mind. The thought darted past in the inspector's mind, but before he could finish it, he let out an anguished scream. The creature's tail made out entirely out of fire pierced the inspector's chest. The man's body then began to glow an orange hue. Goodbye, little inspector. The demon laughed in a devilish way as the man burst into flames and killed his last scream. Unknown place, somewhere in the outskirts of Tokyo. The creature stood in an empty garden-themed veranda. The night above him was colorless and pitch black, cold air brushing against his black, yellow-spotted fur. His brown cold eyes stared at the city of Tokyo, its lights glowing dim because of the mountains and hills that obscured his view. His snout blew a white breath before he rubbed both of his hands. The coldness had entered his body. You seem to be very active. A new voice called from behind the demon. The creature's ears perked up in alertness, but he didn't turn. I was hungry. I couldn't handle my urge. He reasoned, his deep voice soft. I swear, I only do this once a year, and after that, I lay low. His words were suddenly filled with worry. The new man clicked his tongue sharply and the demon moved slightly in jittery. Number 1 wouldn't like it. It's a good thing I'm keeping it a secret. The man slowly emerged from the darkened corner of the veranda. His footsteps made a soft sound. A light coming from his phone bathed and showed his face. He was a man in his 30s with brown hair and black eyes. His face, hard and humorless, possessed a scar that ran down his left cheek. However, this one might be hard. He said in a thick German accent. You killed one inspector and an enforcer. You also imprisoned a girl, the one that you chose as your target tonight. The creature shifted and turned his face away, ashamed of the mistakes that he had done. But the man continued without minding him. Since the cops are here, it means the MWPSB was already on your tail. The German grinned and landed his mocking brown eyes at the creature. Count Furfur, now do you need no one's assistance? No, no too, the creature named Furfur shouted in fury at him. But the German scoffed and shrugged both of his shoulders in a dejected manner. I can take care of this. I can kill some of them and hide immediately. I will not bother him. You better not. The German said with a heavy, threatening tone in his voice. And don't you dare contact number 3. That guy is sensitive and I don't want to deal with this kind of problem anymore. He scowled at Furfur. The demon took a step back in fear. A single sweat of nervousness ran down the demon's heart's brow, despite the snow that was falling around them. Shit, I screwed up. I'm sorry, number 2. I truly am dash. Tell that to the Ghost Rider. Furfur let out a short shriek in shock and clutched the golden pendant hanging from his neck. If the MWPSB was on your trail, then he is too. The German warned before walking away, leaving the fear-stricken demon alone. Tokyo Media Studio, Tokyo City, 1 day later. Governor Karina Komiya sat silently and read the paper in her hand. It was still early morning and the sky was peaceful. Her brows were strained and she blew out a frazzled sigh. This is going to be hard, she said with a small frown. She put the paper on the coffee table in front of her. Governor, ma'am. Karina turned around and greeted her new secretary with a cheerful smile, hiding her uneasiness. We'll be live in 10 minutes. Thanks, I'll be there. Her secretary left her alone, and soon as the door closed, her face became serious. Okay, just answer nicely. Like before. She turned around and faced the mirror. She prepared herself for the interview. The topics that she would discuss were normal and all about to strengthening the country's law regarding the immigrants' rights. However, today, she was expected to be asked by the audience about the recent new topic, one that she was caught off guard to, like the rest of the country. Ghost Rider. She muttered with a small bothered frown, but she quickly clapped both of her hands on her cheeks, erasing her worrying look. Okay, just answer them nicely and always remember to smile, she said with energetic tone before walking out of the room. And that's all for today, folks, the interviewer said in a joyful manner. The former pop star and governor of Tokyo waved at the crowd as claps and cheers coming from her fans in the audience filled the studio. The interview was successful. However, what she had prepared for was the next part of this morning live show. Now, then let us proceed with the question and answer portion. The MC on the stage gleefully welcomed and the governor crossed her hands on her lap. All right, the most crucial part. Karina maintained her smile, but her caution's eyes watched as the MC picked a random person from the audience. The first person was a man, showing an excited grin, wearing a t-shirt that said Idol Karina. He was clearly a fan of the governor's previous job. Hi, Karina-sama. What can you say about the Ghost Rider? And right on schedule. Well, what can I say? I was so shocked when I watched it while eating my breakfast the day after the Shibuya incident. I dropped my poor omelette du fromage. The whole audience snickered a laughter as the governor continued. All I can say is that I thought that Steven Spielberg had visited Japan and was filming a movie in the Shibuya crossing. The audience roared with laughter at silly comments of the governor. All right, got the first question. Karina beamed a confident smile as the MC called another person from the audience. The chosen person, a girl, stood up and beamed a nervous smile. Hi, Karina-sama. Do you like what Ghost Rider did there? Are you in favor of him as a vigilante? Governor Karina's smile weakened a bit. This was a hard question, but then she softly laughed, regaining a bit of her confidence. Everyone loves superheroes, right? If that is so, then as a person, I certainly love a vigilante hero. The audience clapped at her response. The governor then continued. However, as a governor, I must always uphold the law. The Ghost Rider may have saved the people from the creature, but he also endangers our hues. If the Ghost Rider really is a hero, then he mustn't put the law into his own hands. He must either join the law enforcers or cooperate with them. The governor answered straightly and firmly with a proud smiling face. The audience rocked and hollered the studio with their voice. They all had agreed to what she said. The governor then stood up from her seat and waved her right hand. Everyone, always remember, there's no one alone in the Sybil Society. Everyone is connected. Mayagatani, Abandoned Zone, Tokyo City. PL please stop. A girl wearing a school uniform pleaded helplessly. Her poor voice resonated between the two large buildings that made up an alley. In front of her were three men whose faces were carved into malicious grins. Ho, looked at that? A girl from OSO Academy. The first man on the left of the girl giggled as the girl winced. Hey little girl, are you lost or are you cutting classes? The girl let out a yelp as the second man slammed his hand on the wall behind the girl and moved his face closer her. It's bad to cut classes, you know. Why don't you join us? The third man invited, but his tone was filled with malicious intent. The girl closed her eyes and winced in shame and disgust as the man began to caress her brown hair. Why don't you three fags leave the girl alone? The girl and the three men darted to the source of the new voice. Another one. The girl stared with questioning and helpless eyes at the new man standing at the exit of the alleyway. His face was obscured with a red Japanese tengo mask. Huh, who's this? The third man snarled and approached the new man. His right hand flicked a Swiss knife. Who you callin' fags? The second man berated. His face formed an ugly grin. The man in the tengo mask tilted his head to the right. Why you three, of course. The sarcastic tone made the veins of the third and second man pop. They both growled guttural sounds and charged. The man grinned underneath his mask as he dropped his bags and opened both of his palms. What the dash? How did we dash? The two charging men gasped in shock as they found themselves hanging upside down by chains attached to the walls of the buildings that wrapped around their ankles. The third and last man squealed when they were dropped to the ground. His terrified eyes widened in recognition as he realized who was the man behind the tengo mask and black leather jacket. Ghost Rider. It was the girl who muttered first. Her tone was that of in disbelief. The third man screamed as he was pulled by his ankles and dangled upside down beside the girl. Well, that's Killjoy. The Ghost Rider sighed dejectedly while he unzipped his black leather jacket. Japan is so hot, seriously. Why did I even bother putting my jacket on? Thanks. The girl called the Ghost Rider, making him shift his mask at her. He slowly approached her while he spoke. You shouldn't cut classes, Myra Miku. He knows my name. The girl named Myra opened her mouth in slight shock. She watched the Ghost Rider, who picked up her bag and held it close to her face. Seriously, you'll regret it when you grow up. The girl blushed at his sensible words. She took her bag from his bony left hand, made a graceful bow, and quickly took off. Hey youth these days with their cutting classes is cool norm and stupid TikTok dance videos. The Ghost Rider snorted irritably. He picked up his shopping bags and exited the dark alleyway. Apartment 1408, Tokyo City. And yet crime is still happening here. Johnny watched the morning interview of Governor Karina with scrutiny. All throughout the show he had disagreed with every word that she said. This so-called Sybil Society had made everyone weak. He wasn't into politics, but Johnny knew what was wrong with the Sybil Society. It was a paper town, or in this case, paper city. Everyone's desire was regulated and repressed by the AI Sybil, making them almost dull, boring, and inhuman. The demons and devils would surely love to feast on those deprived people soon. He muttered in a warning tone as he opened the box and took out a second-hand laptop that he bought from Miyagdani. Since I can't access Halfaz's phone then hacking is the only way. He glanced at Halfaz's phone beside his laptop. Halfaz. The memory of the dying devil count played in his mind. His joyful, resigning, smile and last words filled his ears, though it was nothing but a phantom feeling right now. Johnny's eyes, without him realizing it, slowly became glassy as he pitted the devil. What the hell? He snapped into reality and glared before he pushed himself up from the floor and walked to his fridge. He took out a huge bottle of chilled whiskey before he slammed the fridge's door hard. No, there's no way I would pity a devil. He tilted the whole bottle into his mouth, gulping half of its contents before he cursed loudly. Shit, I'm not one of those Avengers or X-dudes. I am, cursed. I am Ghost Rider, former king of hell, disgraced and now exiled forever. I am the warden of hell and there's no any reservation in my job. A grimaced frown formed on his face, but he quickly shook his head and opened the laptop. No time to mope. There are demons I need to hunt. The laptop booted up after he pressed the power button and said an incantation. Hellfire enhancement, hacking. MWPSB, Unit 1 office floor, Tokyo City. Irie scratched the back of his head as he strained his eyes on the photocopy picture of the demonic seal of Halfaz. The enforcer was completely lost and he didn't have a clue on where the investigation was going. Say Pops, do you believe that Halfaz was a devil? That's the 23rd time you asked me that, Irie. The enforcer Todoroki turned his chair halfway to him. He too was still clueless to the investigation. A small pocket book of demonology was laid out in front of him and he had been reading it for the last few hours. I still don't think Halfaz was a demon, maybe he was really a secret government bioweapon that had gone rogue. Irie, as much as I want to believe that, actual evidence from the crime scenes contradict your suggestion. No choice but to believe in this reality, Kay said while sitting and glowering. He was reading an occult book regarding the demons of hell. He was reluctant at first when Arita had started to look at the investigation from another angle, the occult angle. What if there are demons or devils who entered in this realm? The device on his wrist rang and he immediately answered. Kisaragi, how's on your end? I'm afraid it's a dead end. Shin, and I didn't find anything in Ministry of Science and Technology's databanks. Mao said from the other end. The enforcer was sitting inside Shin's office, waiting for the analyst to finish skimming through the files. It was a bit hard, Inspector. Some of these words make me dizzy. A low protesting moan escaped Shin while she blew some smoke out of her lips. We already narrowed our search to Biological and Weapons Division databanks, but nothing turned out. Mao looked through the computer hollow screen, reading each of the files. It's as if Halphas had already infiltrated our society long before it. And that's not good. Kay thought of an idea 1 month ago, back in the museum while looking at the grotesque angel e-portrait. Arata's mental trace had revealed that Halphas had illegally entered Japan 20 years ago, and yet his bogus registration on the Sibyl Society was just 17 years old. The devil had lived inside Japan for 3 years straight without being caught by the scanners. And that was very impossible. MOFA's data was also inconclusive. Halphas just appeared out of nowhere. And was he alone when he entered Japan? The dreaded thought made him frown, a strained look forming on his face. That was the idea that he had come to. If not, then we're dealing with something that we might not be capable of enforcing. MWPSB, Chief Inspector's Office. Excuse me, ma'am. Arata's head peered right at the door of Chief Shimatsuki's office. The Chief Inspector didn't respond, her eyes staring at her computer. The inspector then closed the door and saluted the Chief Inspector with a tired-looking face. Today was supposedly my day off. I'm planning to study more about the devils later. What now? He thought, half irate and half wondering what seemed to be the cause on why the Chief Inspector called him when she knew it was his day off. Arata, we received a distress call from the head inspector of Unit 4. The chief said while she chewed on a mint that she took from her pocket-sized mint dispenser. A hollow screen then appeared in front of Arata, showing the name of the inspector in trouble and another man who seemed to be his enforcer. His name is Komiya Morale and his enforcer, Ron Aikton. They were investigating the disappearance of this woman, Carol Kizuma. Another hollow screen popped out beside the two, displaying a woman in her late 20s with shoulder-length brunette hair and black eyes. According to her friends, she was planning to hike and camp on Aokigahara Forest near the foot of Mt. Fuji. She hasn't returned from her destination for 2 weeks now. She was reported missing 2 days ago by her friends. Chief Shimatsuki rested her chin over her right hand. Her brow furrowed as she glowered at the inspector. Inspector Morale and his enforcer was on the case. They'd found clues regarding her whereabouts inside the forest, and that's where his and his enforcer's trail ends. Her hand waved a hollow screen away and then summoned a new one again. And then, 24 hours ago, we received this file. Chief Shimatsuki glanced at the file, an audio type, and played it for the inspector to hear. I am Inspector Morale of the MWPSB Unit 4. I am in trouble dash? I don't what they are. Demons? They are demons? To the Chief Inspector, tell this to Unit 1. The devil is here. The hollow screen dropped after the file had finished playing. The inspector's mouth hung in shock. Demons? Wait, there's another one. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. If this was true, then his fear had really happened. There was another devil, like Halphas, in Japan. There's another devil besides Halphas. Yes, most likely. The Chief Inspector glowered to the fact. The device on Arata's wrist beeped once after she motioned her right hand again, sending a file to the inspector. Those are the last coordinates of the inspector and the enforcer. Find them and the missing girl, if she's with them. She stood up from her chair and moved to the window behind her. The inspector then asked a question to her. Is it possible that the girl had committed suicide? After all, Aokigahara Forest is famous for being a suicide spot. The last clues that the inspector had sent to me suggest otherwise. Arata looked at the screen again, staring at the 3 pictures before he saluted the Chief Inspector and left. The Chief Inspector stood all alone in her office once again. She was still staring at the view of the city from her window. I guess I need to contact Senpai and them again. A pained tone, followed by the clicking of her tongue, escaped her lips. She pressed her device and called the former inspector. Akane Senpai, I think it's time that we take this matter to them. Apartment 1408 Tokyo City. No, and most definitely not. Johnny grumbled as he scanned the files from the Devil Count's phone. He was still sitting in front of the table, in the same spot since he started skimming the contents of the phone earlier that morning, missing his lunch in the process. His stomach grumbled, piquing his attention and making him frown in annoyance. But he wanted to go on. Deep inside of him, he knew he was getting closer and closer to the location of one, if not all, of the Devil Counts. 5 of them, their locations should be here somewhere. His hand stopped as he noticed something. This is a record of transferring money. Johnny stared at the file, his eyes sharpening at each and every word and number floating in his screen. 1 year ago. The Silent Forest Hotel, at least $500,000 yen. Now that's a lot for a hotel. He paused for a moment and then he continued before he read the same hotel again. And then another. His eyes shone in realization and his face formed a sly smirk. Every year, for 17 years, he had been transferring money to this hotel, but for what? But the Ghost Rider already knew what the devil was doing with that money. He's using this hotel as a front to build a small army, isn't he? He grinned at his own revelation. Well then, I'll be paying this hotel a visit. His smile disappeared after a sharp ringtone coming from the phone disrupted his happy mood. He looked at it and saw the words private number display on the screen. This can't be good. He frowned and his brows connected. Whoever is on the other side of the line certainly won't be human. Spare me the introductions, whoever the fuck you are. He growled at the phone as soon as he answered it. There was nothing but silence at first. However, Johnny stayed on the line. And then he heard a low, demonic chuckle. Heh. Despite being ousted in hell, former king of hell Johnny Blaze, you still know how to bare fangs and send shivers down the spine of all demons and devils. Johnny couldn't distinguish the identity of the demon through his voice. He's using an enchantment. He thought gravely as the devil spoke again. Don't bother. Your identity detection ability won't work on me since you can't see me. Not to mention I'm using an enchantment. Figures. What do you want? It doesn't matter if you're tracking me. I can defeat all of this country's enforcers in one go. An amused bellowing laughter filled his right ear. He clicked his tongue in disgust. I know. I also know that you've already hacked Halfaz's phone and you're currently searching the whereabouts of the other devil counts. The reason why I called you is because I'm going to give you the precise location of one of the counts, Count Furfur, to be exact. Count Furfur. Count Furfur, just like Halfaz, was a fallen angel and the leader of 26 demon legions. He had rebelled against God and was cast down to hell. And in hell, he was more gruesome than Halfaz. He loved to play mind games and trick everyone around him, even in his own legion. He made everyone fight and kill each other. But worst of all was his main power. He was a great manipulator of thunder and wind. Count Furfur, if Johnny would rate him, would be 7. He was more challenging than Halfaz. TCH. Well, that sounds challenging, he said wickedly, masking his startled tone. And why would I believe you, a devil in disguise? There was silence at first, but then the voice replied with a sinister tone. Because he was recently causing a menace. For 17 years, ever since he established his hotel, he has been kidnapping girls. The reason why the cops aren't onto him is because he has only done it once a year. He always waits for the trail to go cold, until yesterday. Johnny glanced at the phone, suspiciously, uneased to the information coming from the voice. What happened? He killed an enforcer and an inspector and now the cops are onto him. They already sent someone to his hotel and they will arrive there in exactly 2 hours. The voice paused as it snorted, haughtily. It will be a shame if the humans caught a live demon before the Ghost Rider can cast his judgment on it. Also, it would be a shame if someone had outrun the Ghost Rider. Johnny knew the voice was taunting him, but the devil's words made his face darkened. His right cheek twitched irritably and his eyes glared in aggravation at the wall. He was extremely pissed off with the humans catching his targets first. It was his job. It was the Ghost Rider's job, not theirs. Fine. I'll bite. Good. Sending you the coordinates. Goodbye for now, Ghost Rider. He heard a sharp click of the phone and the line went dead. Johnny looked down on his phone and seconds later its screen lit up, displaying a set of coordinates. True to the devil's words and just as he expected, it was the location of Count Furfur, the Silent Forest Hotel. What is it for you? Johnny was suddenly troubled. Why would a devil will give away the location of another devil? Puzzled by the actions of the caller, he only let out a loud discontented moan. Mystery isn't good for me. Leave that nonsense to that spider dude or Doctor Strange. Well, I might find more clues if I hunt down Count Furfur and steal his phone. He planned and let out a vexed grunt as he prepared for his departure. MWPSB, Bureau Chief's Office, Tokyo City. Bureau Chief Shizuka sighed heavily in distress after he ended his call and put his phone down on the table. He rested his back on his chair and looked at the window. The golden sunset bathed his office in a radiating, tranquil glow. This sight would have calmed his mind, but it couldn't. Because he was expecting the next event that would eventually unfold will cause him great shame to his status and name. Sometimes God works in mysterious ways. And most of the time, his works are done by the demons themselves. A heavy, defeated sigh escaped his lips. His eyes slowly shifted back to his computer screen, where a live video feed was playing. He watched with a calm eyes as the figure of Johnny came out of the bathroom of his apartment unit and was preparing to leave. He then muttered in an unamused tone, "Johnathon Blaze, do forgive me on this." Apartment rooftop. Johnny walked to the rooftop and felt the cold air of October hitting his face. His black leather jacket ruffled loudly as the man turned to the right and moved towards a normal-looking, black-colored granny bike. "I'm ready," he muttered and made a wild grin. Time to hunt Count Furfur. The medallion on his chest glowed in dark gold light. His skin melted away, revealing his skull and bones to the world. Flames crawled down from his right hand and onto the granny bike, which then began to transform its metal structure. The Ghost Rider watched as his granny bike morphed into its true form, the Hell Cycle. He climbed and sat on its seat, breathing in the cold air, which made the flames around his skull grow large. "Let's go," he roared together with the engines of his Hell Cycle and burst towards the afternoon sky. Chapter 8, Case 3-2 The Silent Forest Hotel. Part 2. Highway No. ####. Near Mount Fuji. Cars, buses, and other vehicles moved along the highway on the foot of Mt. Fuji. The night was already high. There was nothing but light traffic along the paved road. In one of the cars, a child was sitting and staring outside with bored eyes. He likely did not enjoy his previous destination because he let out a deadpan sigh. His tiny hands played only his toys, an action figure from a famous anime series. Suddenly, his ears picked up a sound. The sound was faint, but it eventually roared and filled the car. His father, the one who's driving, hadn't noticed the ascending sound. He looked to his side, only for him to swerve the car violently to the left. The child gasped in shock as a motorcycle shot past their family car. The child's eyes lit up in a lively recognition. The being in the motorcycle was a creature that went viral in the Sybil internet, and it made him leap with joy. "Dad, look! It's the Ghost Rider." The cool night air fueled the flames around the Ghost Rider's skull as he swept past a toll booth. The toll booth rattled a loud alarm, signaling that he had crossed the border without paying. The Phantom Rider only flipped his right finger to whoever was the attendant on the booth. As if, he laughed wildly, and his laughter echoed through the silent forest together with the thundering engine of his hell cycle. "Now, how much farther?" He whipped his left wrist, and a map glowing red popped out of his device. 2 minutes. I can arrive in 30 seconds. He pulled the throttle hard. The flames on his motorcycle burst high and shot the burning rider forward with a devilish speed. Johnny pressed the brakes and his hell cycle squealed loudly to a stop. The headlights of his motorcycle shone at a large black gate, over 20 meters high. Its paint was black and filled with rust. In the middle, welded and formed beautifully, was steel mended into different complicated lines and difficult shapes. The Ghost Rider recognized it immediately. It was Count Furfur's seal, and it could only mean that he owned the land beyond the gate. He had arrived. Hehe, ready or not? Johnny glanced down and read the sign beneath the demonic seal. Silent Forest Hotel, closed temporarily for renovations, it said, but he only snorted and turned around. He took a couple of steps, gaining distance away from the gate, before he turned around again and sprinted. Knock, knock. He leapt from the ground and kicked the black gate. The steel structure cried and crashed to the ground after detaching from its hinges. "Now, ready or not?" he asked again to no one as he sat on his motorcycle and moved forward. "What should be my battle strategy?" he thought in a wicked manner. His mind was already running so many gruesome scenarios on how to defeat the Devil Count. He was excited to judge and send the demon back to hell. He wanted let out his lust for destruction, which he had kept inside of him all throughout the day. Silent Forest Hotel, underground control room. Unknown to Johnny, the whole land and hotel was monitored by hundreds of tiny video cameras and security sensors. All of it were feeding the computers of the control room underneath the hotel. The whole room was dark and poorly lit by the blue color coming from hundreds of TV monitors mounted on the wall. The air inside was stale and bad. There wasn't enough ventilation inside the room. So, he really came. A hardened, yet whimpering, voice escaped from Count Furfur. The devil was in his true form. Normally, whenever he wasn't hunting, he would wear his human form. He liked to walk on his human legs and with his back straight. His human face was that of a young white man with short curly hair and sharp purple eyes. But now, everything had changed. I no longer need to wear it. What's the point? He would see the real me through his penance stare. With anxious eyes, he watched as the Ghost Rider arrived at the front door of his hotel. There was no point to walk in his human disguise. Furfur's true form was that of a hart, a stag. His skin was adorned with black and yellow spotted fur. He also possessed a pair of dragon wings hanging on his back and a tail made of fire, which was currently emitting a low dim glow. He curled his lips down after the Ghost Rider threw the bell on the concierge table into the wall after pressing it relentlessly. The rider was hungry and already mad, and Furfur knew he would be his food to his vengeful fire. He frowned and held tightly on his brown horns. What should I do? I don't want to die, not yet. He cursed furiously and widened his eyes in terror. Then he remembered his words to number 2, the German devil, who smirked mockingly to his words. He was looking down on him like he was a weak demon, and it made him frown. He was one of the 5 counts of hell, and he had legions like the rest. No, I'll face him. In fact, I heard that Johnathon Blaze is no longer the king of hell. He glanced at the TV monitor and saw that the Ghost Rider was sitting at the bar, juggling 3 bottles of expensive whiskeys in his hands before he threw them all on the wall in front of him. I even heard that he's also an idiot. He should be easy. The tense face of the demon changed into a menacing wide grin as his confidence returned. He began to laugh in a wild and uncontrollable way while he spread his arms in the air. I'll kill him, right here, right now. Silent Forest Hotel, lobby. The lobby inside was silent and grand. The walls were painted in gold. Large and heavy wood stood and acted as its pillars shone brightly as if it had just been cleaned. The tiles were marble and white, the murals of trees and birds reflecting upon its surface. Sadly, however, a portion of it was already stained by mud and dirt coming from the boots of Johnny, who was now standing in front of the empty concierge. "Hello, Dash? Anybody here?" he screamed, jocularly, and slammed the bell on the table, expecting a person to come out and greet him. Silence was the only reply of the building, the ambient sound filling his ears and making him tap his right foot. He threw the bell away and glanced at the wall behind the concierge. A group of photos were hanging on the wall. Previous customers or patrons of the hotel smiled down at Johnny, and together with them was a white man with curly blonde hair and sharp purple eyes. A large hollow portrait of him dominated the middle of the wall, and his name was displayed below it. Gregory Beats. The Ghost Rider read and then chuckled. Well, hello there, Count Furfur. Johnny wasn't fooled by his smile. Even though it was a picture, he could see right through his angelic smile, the demonic form of the young man. His heartbeat quickened in cruel anticipation. Silent Forest Hotel, bar area. The outside facade of the hotel was that of a Victorian mansion. Everything was painted in the theme of either white or gold. In the bar area, the man was surrounded by lavish and exquisite furnishing. Johnny was a bit confused at first. For a demonic lair, this place was too fancy, rich, and an eyesore. But he just shrugged it off and sat down on one of the bar stools. TCH. Where on earth is he? He grumbled, impatiently. He went over the bar counter and took one of the expensive whiskeys, sipping on it. I'm drinking one of your expensive shit here, he called again in a childish way, but again, silence answered him. Ugh, fine, I'll do whatever I want, he shouted in anger, flames shooting high on the ceiling, and took 2 more bottles, juggling them like clown in a circus. He glanced around the bar area and the walls. Huge taxidermy decapitated heads of deer adorned the golden wall, their eyes looking straight to Johnny, watching him in an eerie observing-like manner, and it unnerved him to his core. Where the hell are you? He shouted and threw the bottles at the deer. The contents poured all over the floor as tiny bits of glass landed with sharp tips. Johnny, fuming still, watched as the liquid pooled on the marble tiles before it began to trail on the edges of the wall. He blinked, startled at the action of the liquid. He moved to the spot where the liquid disappeared and knocked the wall softly with his right bony finger. His knocking made a loud resounding echo, hollow, which could only mean one thing. Johnny chuckled to his discovery and threw his right fist on the wall. The wall collapsed with a loud bang and a creepy-looking dark corridor greeted the Ghost Rider. Just as he expected, the true face of the hotel was now right in front of him. The Ghost Rider rattled his chains in his hands and made a low rumbling laugh. Here's Johnny. Silent Forest Hotel, Underground Control Room. Count Furfur watched, with observing eyes, the Ghost Rider walking down the stairs. The underground hotel area was separated into 4 segments. Block A was the first floor, where the Ghost Rider was right now. The devil smiled viciously while he tightened a fist in trepidation. He had designed this hotel from top to bottom. Its outward looks may look like it was just a normal fancy hotel, but the underground area was its true face. It was Count Furfur's favorite place. Every nook and cranny, corner and space, was riddled with traps that could kill a person instantly. The labyrinth underground was his palace and his sanctuary from the judging eyes of Sybil. He made a satisfied grin after the Ghost Rider fell on the floor, face splat, avoiding a trap. Now then, about the woman. The Count then slowly glanced to his left, and stared at the door that leads to another dark room. Shall I use her? Silent Forest Hotel, Underground Block A. Johnny slowly poked his flaming skull on a corner. He had just descended from a flight of stairs. The man was now staring at a very dark corridor with no doors. He couldn't see the end and his senses couldn't detect any demons or devils other than Count Furfur, who was, most probably, at the other end of the hallway. Heh, I guess this will be easy. Johnny scoffed and took a step on the floor. The tile underneath his right boot sunk, triggering a loud thud. Before he could fully react, a shutter suddenly descended and closed the stairwell beside him. His only way out had closed. What the dash? Johnny, surprised, half turned towards the shutter, but then his eyes caught a symbol that suddenly glowed by the wall on his left. The symbol zapped and pushed the Ghost Rider with tremendous force. He landed with his skull flat on the floor. The hell? That was Count Furfur's seal? Johnny let out a loud groan of pain. The lightning had paralyzed his body. He felt that his left side was all numb and heavy. Fuck. He turned his head up and gritted in annoyance. This won't be easy. Grumbling, he pushed himself up. However, his right hand pressed another tile. A loud thud echoed again above him. Johnny looked up again. The ceiling opened up and ejected spears. The man quickly rolled to his right, avoiding all the spears that could easily pierce a huge hole on his body. He stood up and scowled while brushing the dust off his jacket. This hotel is going to get a no-star review on Trivago. He paused as his eyes landed on one of the blades of the spears. What on earth? He took one of the spears and held the blade up. Latin words were mended on its surface and Johnny recognized it. Latin words, and it's a blessing seal, from an angel. The words that were etched on the spear were blessings. The spear was a heavenly weapon. Why are there heavenly weapons here? And why did Count Furfur have this? Johnny touched the blade part with his right hand. His right hand sizzled and a scalding pain crawled through his right limb. He let go of the spear, creating a loud clank that echoed through the floor. Damn it! Are there more heavenly weapons beside these spears? The question rattled his mind, fear beginning to sip inside of him. Heavenly weapons, weapons that were made or blessed in heaven were one of his weaknesses. Johnny had just triggered one of the many traps of Count Furfur, and he was sure that most of his traps had blessings on it and there would be more. He gritted his teeth, furious that he was trapped in this place and that he walked straight to the open palms of his enemy. Relax, just avoid them if you can. Johnny took a step forward on a tile with his left boot, sinking it to the ground. A loud thud rumbled above him as the whole ceiling opened up. A long line of automated machine guns emerged and aimed right at him. Oh shit. The Ghost Rider cursed in doom as his body was completely covered with red laser dots. The machine guns whirled and the whole corridor was filled with loud gunshots. Shit, shit, shit. Johnny cursed as he bent low and dashed madly. Bullets rained on him on all directions. He extended both of his hands, and his mystical chains shoot out, twirling them haphazardly in the air. This was the Phantom Rider's only shield. Johnny's chains parried every bullet aimed at him, protecting him from the deadly barrage. Where the hell is the ending of this dash? The Ghost Rider yelped after he felt a scorching ache on his left shoulder. He glanced to his left and saw a bullet hole. His eyes widened in terror. The bullets are also blessed. The realization almost made him stop, but then he felt another twitch, this time on his right shoulder. The injury made his heart beat fiercely as the terror bloomed inside of him. The man howled in anguish and pushed himself up. Johnny's boots exploded into fire and it propelled him forward. I will not die here. His voice, deep and infernal, screamed throughout the corridor. For a long time, he felt fear and terror in his heart. The desire to survive was always within him, but he hadn't used it for a long time. And now that he had felt it again, it made him feel strange and alive. Is that the door? Johnny's eyes caught a glimpse of the door, a white rectangular shape standing by the wall, 15 meters away from him. Finally, he can get out of this dangerous corridor. Huh? These traps wouldn't stop me dash. But then Johnny made a terrible mistake. His right foot stepped on a black tile. It sunk under his weight. The wall to the left of Johnny opened up and, emerging from the darkness, were 25 small, sharp knives. The Ghost Rider gasped in horror as the blades of the knives shone brightly in his eyes, showing the familiar Latin words on its surface. The knives were, just like the guns, just like the spears, endowed with heavenly blessings. Gah! Johnny howled and forcefully crouched his head to the ground. His skull hit the floor, making it crack. And because he was still producing thrust from his boots, his whole lower body spun forward. The Ghost Rider tumbled and smashed right through the door. He landed on the floor and quickly rolled to his left, kicking the door to close. The machine gun whirled down and stopped as its red laser could no longer detect the phantom invader. Johnny had cleared the first block. Underground control room, Silent Forest Hotel. Count Furfur's face was etched in a scared frown. He had just watched the Ghost Rider clear the first block. His eyes were filled with fear and rage again as he gritted his teeth. His hands were balled into fists. He was expecting the former King of Hell to be heavily injured and yet he was just lying on the floor right now. No, I expect you to be half dead. Count Furfur slammed his fists on the table. He gritted his teeth, frustrated at his predicament. All those guns and painstaking labor of ordering and handling each and every bullets, knives, and spears that were blessed by that angel, all of it had gone to waste. Furious that all of his traps on the first block didn't work, he cursed fiercely again and slammed his head on the table with force. No, I'm not done yet. He still has a long way to go. A strained laughter escaped from his lips after he lifted his head from the table. Blood streaked down his injured forehead and onto his maddened grin, but he didn't mind. How can you escape this block, Johnny, when every weapon in there is blessed? A maddening chuckle escaped his lips. Silent Forest Hotel, underground area. Ugh. A low bellowing sigh escaped from the Ghost Rider's mouth. The small sparks on his skull returned as the view of the dark ceiling greeted his sight. He was lying on the dirty floor. He could feel the dust and small debris on his back. That was, he paused and coughed hard, intense. He slowly pulled himself up only to let out a sharp gasp. He felt a pang of pain on his left thigh, making him look down. A knife was sticking out of his black pants, the uncomfortable burn was coming from the weapon. TCH damn it. Johnny cursed in irate and pulled the knife. The hole on his black pants slowly mended back, together with the skin and muscles underneath it. The man then pushed himself from the ground and blew out fiery air. Half healed, he felt his strength slowly building up. Seriously, this hotel is twisted as fuck. He frowned and made an evil eye as he slowly poked his head out of the corner. The hallway wasn't long. This time the end had turned a sharp angle to the right. Johnny then slowly extended his right foot, tapping the hard floor, before finally emerging from his spot. There were no traps in the hallway and it made him breathe with ease. This must be a saving point. He made a low chuckle as he walked and scanned his surroundings vigilantly. I swear if one of his traps is a pair of creepy twin girls, asking me to play with them, I will lose my shit dash. He stopped his thoughts after his boots stepped on something soft. He looked down and saw the pile of dirty, burnt clothes of a man lying on the floor. The man squatted down and touched the clothes. These clothes. The last moments of the owner of the burnt clothes flashed before his eyes. The inspector, leaning on the wall, was gasping for breath. His outstretched begging hands were pointed to the figure looming over him. Count Furry. Ha, so he gave in to his urges, huh. An excited laughter escaped his lips. The sight of the devil made the flames inside his guts burst out in brutal energy as his hunger for vengeance, which was fueled by the cruel actions of the devil, called out to him more. Don't worry. This time, I won't fall for your tricks anymore. The Ghost Rider declared with energy before he turned the corner, towards the next room.